Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Golden Gopher Era podcast. My name is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, publisher at Gophers Nation of the On3 Network, covering Minnesota Golden Gophers athletics. I'm joined by my co-host Tony Liebert from Bring Me the News here today. We're recording this on November 13th, one day before the Gophers take on the Oregon Ducks at Autzen Stadium in Eugene, Oregon, a 25.5-point underdog in that one. Before we jump into talking about the Gophers and the Ducks matchup, we do want to go over what has been a really terrific run for the Golden Gophers on the recruiting trail over the last week or so. I guess it was all last week. Going into the weekend, this week has been quiet. But Tony, I mean, last week 6 commitments for this 2026 recruiting class for the Gophers. It balloons, from I think it was at what 20, 24 commitments or so. Now it's up to 31, or 25 to 31 now in a couple days. They pick up 3 high school commits. Running back Jed Walker, a former West Virginia commitment. He's a 3-star here on Rivals, top 40 running back in the country. Wide receiver Braden Stevens out of Platte County in Missouri, 3-star prospect on Rivals. And Wisconsin offensive tackle Beckett Schreiber, a top 10 prospect according to Rivals in Wisconsin. But then they also went to the JUCO ranks, which we don't see the Gophers do quite a bit, and they picked up the trio of safety MJ Graham, wide receiver Derek Sally, and defensive lineman KJ Henson. And they may not be done in this cycle either. So I guess just we could talk about some of these commitments in general in a minute, but yeah, just give me your overall thoughts here about the Gophers going out and adding 6 players to this class last week.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting because just on sheer numbers, I think it's the biggest class that PJ Fleck would have in terms of high school recruiting. And then you add the 3 JUCO recruits as well, which sets up what could be a pretty interesting stretch before early National Signing Day here. And you can even throw in Aaron Thomas, the offensive lineman from Arizona, who was committed to Ohio State.
Yeah,
Also committed to
that was
Minnesota.
that happened right before that, or right in the midst. I totally forgot about him. Thank you. So 7.
Yeah, and I just looking at their roster from next year, there's obviously still about a month of football left in the regular season here, but uh if you add all of their incoming commitments to players that have eligibility beyond this year, they're all the way up to like I think it's 118 players maybe, and with the uh roster limit now with the House NCAA settlement last year with the 105 player limit that still kind of getting grandfathered in, not exactly. We don't really know how hard those rules are going to be. That might be a lot of players that they have to, I guess, cut down, so to speak. And maybe they expect some of these guys to enter the transfer portal. There always are. Um, and they sent out an interesting offer and to a quarterback who's committed to Virginia Tech recently. I feel like there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes right now, setting up for what could be a pretty interesting offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up the roster limit at 105. You mentioned the grandfather rules, which is correct. It'll be very interesting to see at what number the Gophers ultimately end up at for next season, since I don't think it will be 105. But obviously, like you said, there are going to be players that enter the transfer portal. We're not going to sit here and say we expect so and so to enter the portal, at least right now. I mean, I think if you're a Gophers fan or a Gophers writer who follows the team closely, you probably have a decent idea of players who could fit the criteria of guys who would maybe look to continue their careers elsewhere, based off maybe where they are in their career, the lack of playing time they may have, so on and so forth. So there are definitely guys out there that I think we could both, if we sat down and made a list of 10 to 15 players, I think we would have a pretty strong crossover there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But talking about the 7 commitments, because you did bring up Aaron Thomas, I totally forgot about him. He committed. They got the 3 commitments from Walker, Schreiber, and Stevens on the 3rd. Thomas commits on the 5th, and then last Friday, Saturday, Sunday they pick up 3 JUCO commits. So thank you for bringing up Thomas. Let's start with him because he was probably the biggest of the 4 high school kids that they got to commit to them. Former Ohio State commitment. Now, I think it's fair to say that him and the Buckeyes both mutually agreed to part ways. His senior tape may not have been up to the Ohio State standard. Now, I'm not saying that's a reason for Minnesota fans to not be excited about this pickup. This is still a very good pickup. Rivals industry rankings have him number 515 in the country, top 40 offensive tackle, top 10 player in Arizona. Still a very good player, still a guy who can be a multi-year starter down the road. But this is a guy that they invested a lot of energy in, a lot of time in early in the process. As his recruiting stock skyrocketed last year, they tapered off in terms of teams in the running. He eventually committed to Ohio State. They parted ways in recent weeks. It becomes official 2 weeks ago, and then he commits to Minnesota. Despite Ohio State cutting ties with him, despite maybe the senior tape not being up to par or up to expectations, I still think this is a really, really nice pickup for the Gophers and one that Gophers fans should be excited about in this cycle.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing that a casual college football fan that just watches their favorite team on Saturdays probably doesn't realize when it comes to recruiting that, especially places like Ohio State, when they have their pick of the litter, for lack of a better term, of the recruits they want to add in a given class. And even when we get more into the offseason with the transfer portal, it just sometimes these teams give a recruiter, a player, a nudge saying, hey, we might not really have a spot for you anymore. And that's kind of what happened with Thomas. But I agree with you. I think Minnesota realized that they had a few offensive line classes that didn't pan out exactly how they envisioned,
Sure.
especially last year with Philip Daniels entering the transfer portal. I think he was a guy that they envisioned being a multi-year starter on the offensive line, which I think contributes a little bit to this year's offensive line not being up to snuff. And they went out and added Thomas, who is certainly a guy who could be a multi-year starter at a school like Minnesota with the right development. Um, I don't think he's a level of a prospect as Nathan Roy or even Philip Daniels starting as a redshirt freshman, but
Yeah.
he's probably just one tier below that, at least based on my opinion. But I mean, they clearly went out and wanted to have a good offensive line class. They lost Daniel McMorris and Benjamin as flips to other schools, but I think Thomas is a really intriguing player to add next to Andrew Trout and Gavin Meyer, who might be in that level of like a Nathan Roy or
Sure.
a Ariante Ursary or guys like that in the past.
Sure, yeah, and Thomas is a prospect. He is still on the raw side. He's still going to need time to develop. Once he, as most obviously all offensive linemen need time to develop. But yeah, I definitely would not peg him in if you're a Minnesota fan to be a redshirt freshman starting caliber player. He's going to be a guy that maybe we see him a couple snaps as a redshirt freshman, perhaps a little bit more as a redshirt sophomore. But definitely a guy that when he's in maybe that back half of redshirt sophomore year and going into a redshirt junior season, that you can see being in that spot to play to be a starter. Uh, One of those guys that maybe necessarily not going to be a huge impact guy early in his career, but could be a pretty good player in year 4 and 5 of his, or 3, 4, and 5 of his tenure in the Twin Cities. I guess we'll quickly go through the rest. Running back Jed Walker. Gophers already had 2 running backs in his class. Ryan Estrada, the El Paso 4-star running back, had a fantastic senior season. He's a guy who can come in right away next year and potentially make an impact. I would expect him to. Um, Though that could be a very, very deep running back room depending on what transpires this offseason. They also have Ezekiel Bates, the Philadelphia area native. But Joe Walker, a little bit of a bigger running back, 6'2", 205 pounds, former West Virginia running back commit, top 700 player nationally, top 50 running back nationally, top 100 player in Texas. I know top 100 doesn't necessarily sound great, but when you talk about Texas, that's still a pretty strong accomplishment. I think over 5,000 career rushing yards. I mean, this is a big running back, a productive running back, somebody that I think, is a really intriguing running back for the Gophers to add to this running back room going forward. 6'2", 215. We talk about that size, but also a 4.55 40. Really intriguing combination for Walker, and I'm going to be very interested to see what type of role he develops during his tenure.
Yeah, Minnesota obviously has a pretty good track record of recruiting high school running backs past few years with Mo Ibrahim, Darius Taylor, even Bucky Irvin, and this year's class is really interesting with Estrada, who might be a guy who can contribute as a true freshman, and like you mentioned, then with Bates on top of Jet Walker now, and first year running backs coach Jaden Everett definitely built an interesting class. There's been years where the Gophers get two running backs, years where they've gotten three. And like Walker is a really talented player that could totally contribute at the Big Ten level early in his career. But it just when you have this many bodies in that position room adds to the fact, like mentioned earlier, that it could be an interesting offseason and there could be a few
Yeah.
guys that enter the portal or change their mind that we don't expect to.
If my
And
numbers are correct, as of now, the only guy who's definitely out this offseason is Cam Davis, which means six other guys right now have eligibility to return next year. Will Darius Taylor go pro coming in the season? I would have thought so, but he's I think finished 3 games this year, so who knows about that? I think there's going to be movement there, like you said, but please continue.
yeah, I mean, Gophers fans, they remember before Mo Ibrahim's last year when he decided to come back, that kind of prompted Bucky Irving and Kai Thomas at the time to enter the transfer portal. There are obviously more circumstances, especially for Irvin going to Oregon, but they didn't have a clear place to start. And if Darius Taylor does that, um, again, you don't want to speculate, but there's a lot of guys in that room that could start at other schools, so maybe they look elsewhere. But I think Walker gives them a lot of insurance in terms of a guy who, if there were a lot of injuries and some surprise players to enter, he would not be overwhelmed, I think, at a Big Ten level early in his college career. So I think it's a pretty big addition this late in the cycle.
Absolutely, and as we're going through this, I think we're going to make this recruiting episode a standalone episode. So those listening, be sure to check out our next episode that we will publish right with this one to preview that Oregon and Minnesota game. But yeah, really intrigued to see what happens with this running back room this offseason because AJ Turner coming off, a brutal knee injury this season. Well, we assume it was a knee injury based off what happened in that Cal game. What happens with him? Darius Taylor, Fame's set to return. Grant Washington, Trey Berry, Xavier Ford, all could return. I look at those trio of freshmen. I'd be really surprised, Tony, if all three of those true freshmen are back next season, especially with three more as things stand right now coming into the room this offseason.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this Walker edition was almost a little bit. If you remember, and any Gophers fan listening to this in the preseason Vanderbilt transfer, Johan Cardenas kind
True.
of had a mutual decision to leave the program. We didn't really get an exact reasoning behind that. Seemingly entering the transfer portal, maybe he's just stepping away from football, but he was a redshirt freshman, I
Yeah.
believe, or redshirt sophomore. So Adding Walker, I think that had a little bit to do with it. That they just need another guy in that room, I think.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with everything you said. There's just too many bodies in there, and with the way the rules are, some of these college kids are just gonna want to go to a school where they see a clear path to playing time.
Absolutely. Um, we'll move on to Beckett Schreiber. I want to save Brady and Stevens for last because I'm going to talk about him and JUCO wide receiver Derek Sally a little bit together. But Beckett Schreiber, 6'5", 285-pound offensive tackle out of Vel Phillips Memorial High School in Madison, Wisconsin. So the Gophers go into Badger territory and nab another Wisconsin native here. And by Badger territory, we obviously mean legitimately right in their backyard. Notably, did not have a Wisconsin offer, but what he did have was an Indiana offer. Previously committed to Washington State, the Gophers and Indiana both were pushing for him, both hosted him on official visits. It was the Gophers who ultimately wound up winning this official visit. Uh, you know, I think this is a good depth addition to the class. Maybe not necessarily somebody you're expecting, you know, as high as expectations as a Andrew Trout, a Gavin Meyer, or even um, a
Thomas.
Aaron Thomas. But somebody that you bring in, you see how they develop over the course of 2-3 years, and maybe they are a dime in the rough type addition to this room. And if he doesn't pan out, that's okay too. You always need depth at the offensive line. It's one of those positions you could never have too many warm bodies at. So I like the addition. I don't have too many thoughts overall on him as a player, but I think offensive line is one of those positions you could just never take too many players at. I do think there is quite a bit of upside here, though. Definitely a long-term play here rather than a more short-term outlook.
Yeah, I mean it's been interesting. Brian Callahan's been the Gophers offensive line coach for a while now, and they've had a few of these guys, I guess, hit for lack of a better term, and becoming Big Ten starters, where they're kind of a unheralded 3-star recruit, and late in their career they break through and become a starter. A guy like Nathan Bowe, who ended up being a center, but or maybe even just top of my head, Blaze Andrews wasn't too highly regarded as a recruit, and I mean, best case scenario, that's the type of player that Schreiber is. That late in his career, I think he breaks through. He probably will rise up the recruiting rankings a little bit between now and early National Signing Day, based on him getting interest from Minnesota and Indiana. But yeah, like you mentioned, you just want a lot of guys in there, and at a program like Minnesota, if there are traits that he has where you like, and you're like, well, maybe in 2 or 3 years this guy can be a contributor. You just got to take that risk, because that's where a program like Minnesota is able to break through in the margins and getting players that other big programs don't see in terms of recruiting.
Yeah, well said on that. You could even you could even add Ariante to that list of guys who are unheralded. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, true.
he was in our national rankings. He was 920th overall as a recruit in the industry rankings. Borderline top 100 offensive line tackle and top 20 player in Missouri at number 19. He develops into a number 48 overall pick, a second round pick in the NFL draft. But yeah, and I think Brian Callahan is one of those guys. Even though he's had some misses on the offensive line for sure over a couple cycles, he's also had enough of these success stories when it comes to long term projects that you, if you're PJ Fleck, if you're a Minnesota fan, I think you just have to trust what he's doing with the offensive line, what he's doing on the recruiting trail, because for every one or two misses, he's developed some really strong offensive linemen in the process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That I mean, that's kind of what's held this program back. I think the last couple of years is they really haven't had that exactly. Um, they haven't hit on any of these guys, and they're kind of just missing that one offensive lineman. I mean, we mentioned Philip Daniels in the portal. I think a guy that doesn't really get mentioned in terms of Minnesota's offensive line is Caden McConnell, who's now starting at Vanderbilt, SEC starting offensive lineman that used to be at Minnesota, and he transferred a few cycles ago. But they just need more bodies in there because I think that's their issue right now. I mean they've used the same five guys all year and they've moved them around, but it seems like they just are missing that second gear in terms of an offensive line. And you can hope that some of these guys pan out, but like you said, you just need to throw in as many bodies as possible.
Absolutely. Now going to wide receiver, and is the echo still there? By the way.
It's better.
Okay. Um, be a little bit behind the scenes there, but going to wide receiver, there was two things the Gophers needed going forward. That was more speed and size, and they accomplished both of those with the additions of Braden Stevens, three-star prospect out of Platte County, Missouri, and wide receiver Derek Sally out of Hutchinson Community College, one of the top JUCO wide receivers in the cycle. Talking about Stevens first, I mean, this is a kid who has elite speed at the wide receiver position. A guy who's going to be able, you're going to be able to put him in the slot position, and he's going to be able to make an impact out of that position. Good, has game changing speed, good route runner. Really exciting addition. I think probably we have him ranked as barely a top 2,000 prospect. I think he could be quite a bit higher than that. Really, really like this pickup by the Gophers. He was a guy who was committed to South Dakota State not too long ago. Saw his recruitment surge this fall. Picked up offers from Minnesota, West Virginia, Nebraska, and James Madison. With Nebraska, West Virginia, Minnesota all in the last month. And I think this could be a really, really big addition when we look back in a couple years.
Yeah, I agree with you. His athletic profile, right off the bat, is just what you want to see from a Big Ten prospect. But then again, his physical profile, there aren't that many 5'8", 5'9" receivers in the Big Ten, which obviously makes it harder for him to contribute. But for the Gophers a few years ago, a guy like Hoskins, who entered the transfer portal this offseason, kind of a similar player in my opinion, where if you get the ball in his hands in unique situations and creative ways, he could be a playmaker. It might not happen year one or two, but when you get further in his career, maybe even as a returner, he's the type of player that is really explosive and you want the ball in his hands. And again, like we kind of mentioned with the offensive line, you just need to take shots and hope that one of these guys hit because um, he has the profile you want from a wide receiver. He just doesn't have the size, and I guess you can hope there have been guys who break through, and it just less based on being
Yeah,
5'8" or 5'9", and that's probably why he's ranked so lowly on rivals. But still a solid addition, and I think he can totally outperform expectations.
absolutely. Then going over to Derek Salley, the 6'4" wide receiver from Hutchinson Community College. The Gophers really have struggled this year with contested catches, 50-50 balls. They've done so the last few. They've struggled in that area the last few years. Sal is a guy that you could put on that outside. Good route runner. Doesn't have elite speed, but has good speed, good athleticism, good fluid hips. He's a guy you can put on that outside. Drake Lindsay could throw up a 50-50 ball to him, and you could probably feel pretty confident he's going to come down with him more times than not. He's going to have a matchup advantage over most cornerbacks. I think this is a really much needed pickup for the Gophers at wide receiver, and somebody who can come in and make an impact right away next season, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I would put him in the Dalen Wright, Malachi Coleman tier for the Gophers fans. Dalen Wright, a guy a few years ago was a Texas A&M transfer that physically had the profile of an NFL wide receiver, and there were times where he looked that good with the Gophers, but he struggled with consistency and staying on the field all the time. And he was a great contested catch guy, like you kind of mentioned with Sally. And I think we're kind of seeing a similar thing with Malachi Coleman this year, where he comes in for those contested catch situations, and he looks the part of an NFL receiver. And I think Sally has potential to be a similar player where if he puts it all together, he could be a really, really good college football wide receiver. But then again, he might just be a little bit raw. Route running's not his game. He's not as crisp as a player like Lemecki Brockington we're seeing this year, where he's really good at intermediate routes and kind of runs the full route tree. I think it'll be a longer process for Sally to improve his route running, but if he hits his potential, he's the high. I think he's the highest potential guy they added in the last month.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with you there. Moving on to safety, MJ Graham, another Hutchinson Community College guy. Number 33 JUCO player in the country, top 5 safety, top 10 JUCO prospect in Kansas. Best way to describe him is a smart, versatile safety who's going to be able to fulfill a variety of roles for the Gophers. Well, obviously, like Sally, somebody who come in right away next year and potentially make an impact. It'll be interesting because you got Coy Parrish, you got Kerry Brown returning, Aiden Galsby can return, Garrison Monroe can return. So you got 4 guys potentially returning there. We'll see if all 4 do. But Darius Green and Deontay McMillan both are running out of eligibility. So I think the spot that Graham could possibly slide right into going into next season is that nickelback role for the Gophers.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's kind of at least that's his clearest path. I think to a defined role next year. Um, and then again, we don't want to speculate entirely about guys who can enter the transfer portal, but
Sure.
Aiden Goosby's been the Gophers' number 3
Yeah,
safety
Gooseby,
for
sorry.
2 years, and maybe he wants a bigger role. Um, and yeah, it's just I agree with you. I think the clearest path is filling the role that McMillan and Darius Green had this year, kind of in the nickel position. And he's the type of player that I don't think he's going to look out of place on a Big Ten field as soon as next year.
And the final one was defensive lineman KJ Henson, 6'4", 275. Again, Hutchinson Community College, top 10 defensive lineman in the JUCO ranks, top number 32 nationally in the JUCO ranks as well. Actually, a Maryland native before he made his way to Hutchinson. 6'4", at 6'4", 275, definitely more of a true defensive tackle instead of a nose tackle. But, they're losing both Logan Redding as well as Rushawn Lawrence at that defensive tackle position this year. We're, texting a couple of weeks ago talking about that defensive tackle position being a little bit of a question mark going into next year just because of the lack of experience and the lack of snaps at that position. Well, here's one of those answers. Henson is going to be able to step in and compete for a starting time or at least a rotational role next season at that defensive tackle spot. And they'll hope that they could get similar production as they've gotten out of Rushawn Lawrence this season, who I thought has been pretty impressive, all things considered. He's outplayed Logan Redding, who's been around the program now for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to the offseason, I think that interior position is probably going to be one of their biggest needs because Devin Eastern's likely, I believe he's out of eligibility
Yeah,
after this year, and he
yes.
has a chance to get drafted. So that's your top 3 guys moving on, and then Purdue transfer Mo Amanode has been out all year. Maybe he comes back, uses an extra year of eligibility.
Yeah. But
But right
and
there,
even just quickly on him, even with him, because while we never got told what was his issue with Minnesota, he missed the entire spring at Purdue with a back injury. One, I think it's probably safe to assume they're probably related. So if it is the back issue, I mean, even if he does, even with that extra year of eligibility, I think it's a big question right now if he's even going to be able to go, just because he had all spring to try to get healthy, all summer and he still wasn't healthy. Is that back ever going to be ready to play again?
100%. And then you throw in Nate Becker, who's a former walk-on. That's your top 4 or 5 interior options that might be gone after the year. So that's a huge question mark heading into the offseason. Riley Sunrum's a guy who's quietly been getting a few snaps here and there, but uh, you don't want to throw in a guy who's really never been a consistent contributor in the Big Ten to be your number one option on the
Right.
defensive tackle spot. So that's going to be a big need in the transfer portal, I think. They have some interesting players coming in as true freshmen, but not one that clearly. I mean, Howie Johnson looks really good, but again, you don't really want to rely on a true freshman.
Yeah, and
In the
we haven't
interior.
seen the Gophers put. We've seen them play true freshmen in the past, but we haven't seen them really, you know, give true freshman defensive linemen that much trust early in their career.
Yeah, so Henson was definitely, I think, a need because they just need veteran bodies there. And I think that's a position that they're going to look at to add this offseason as well. But Henson's not a guy who I think is going to be an all-conference type of player, but he's a guy you can fit in a rotation there, and you need as many bodies as you can get on the defensive line.
Absolutely. Now we talked about the 7 commitments they've gotten in the last 2 weeks, and they may not be done yet. You brought up the quarterback offer, Cole Bergeron. Before we get to that, Gophers fans, this is a great time, to do a little bit of a self plug. If you go over right now to Gophers Nation, you can sign up for $1 your first week, and you also get a full year of access to the Athletic as well with that. The Cole Bergeron offer is one that we anticipated. We brought up back on October 24th in our Gophers Nation War Room that Bergeron was a name to keep an eye out. The Gophers were interested there. Then this past weekend, they host him on a visit very quietly. They offer him, and now things are starting to get interesting with Bergeron. They already have a quarterback commit in Owen Lanzu. He had an injury this season. He's had an up and down senior season. I think he's a quality quarterback prospect, but is by no means a given to be a starting quarterback at the collegiate level. Neither is Bergeron, but Bergeron cut that out. But Bergeron is definitely a very very intriguing quarterback prospect. 6'4", 210 pounds, top 50 quarterback in the country. Number 20 player in the state of Louisiana, been committed to Virginia Tech for quite a while. This is also a sign to me that the Gophers are expecting to probably lose another quarterback out of the room this offseason on top of Emmett Moorhead, who will exhaust his eligibility, Tony.
Yeah, and I don't want Gophers fans to speculate that it's going to be Drake Lindsey. I don't think it's going to be Drake Lindsey, but I do think they think I agree with you. This signals to me that they expect to lose at least one of those quarterbacks, and they probably just want to invest in a younger player because they know they're comfortable with Drake Lindsey as their guy, and they'd rather, I think, invest in a player who could develop into something a year or two down the road rather than a veteran in the transfer portal. Because we've seen this year that they trust Max Chickenjansky as their backup, who seems like a Gophers through and through guy who will probably stay with the program. And like you mentioned, Lansu as well, that they have coming in. He's not the same level prospect that Lindsey and Jackson Colick was last year as a 4-star recruit last year. He's an interesting player to watch this offseason as well. But yeah, I think they just want an extra arm there. And like you mentioned, it's something that could move quickly in terms of his recruitment. But he's an interesting player. I think he probably has a bit of a higher ceiling than Owen Lansu, and a player that could be interesting in the Gopher system.
Yeah, he's definitely more of a quarterback more similar to Drake Lindsey than Owen Lanzu is at this moment. And, Bergeron talked about it with the Rivals recruit analyst Sam Spiegelman about that. He's seen how the staff has developed Drake Lindsey. Their games are similar, and that that's something that really appeals to him. And he said that after that visit and the offer, it's given him a lot to think about. The Gophers have become a real option. The staff answered a ton of questions that he had, and that that he's going to have a hard decision to make here in the coming weeks. And I think that my gut's telling me right now that I think the Gophers have a pretty good chance of adding him to this class. Now, what I will say is I do wonder what his timeline is to make a decision, because Virginia Tech is in the middle of hiring their next head coach, obviously. There's a lot of rumors that could be Penn State's James Franklin, right? If it comes to fruition, does it come to fruition in the next 2-3 weeks by, late November, early December? If so, does that addition make Bergeron rethink things? If James Franklin gets hired by Virginia Tech, does Virginia Tech then add 4-star quarterback Troy Hoon, who was committed to Penn State before under James Franklin and has said that he would be interested in following Franklin potentially to his next destination as well? Minnesota was shown interest in Hoon as well. They may have offered him, but I don't believe they did. But either way, he was a guy that Minnesota was shown interest in this fall as well. But so that's something just to consider with this. As things stand right now, I think the Gophers have a good chance. But that Virginia Tech hire, who the head coach chooses to bring with them, if they have a quarterback committed elsewhere with them right now, could be, a big part of this ultimate decision.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And that it just, I think, shows more that once one domino falls this offseason in the coaching carousel, there could be a ton of stuff that happens from that. And when you look at it in a Gophers perspective, that it might just be their number two QB in their high school recruiting class. It's just there's so many. One thing happens that causes another thing to happen, that causes another thing to happen, and that's just, I think, what this offseason is going to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and we'll quickly tie this in just to this, but PJ Fleck's name continues to pop up here and there in the coaching carousel. We've been saying it for a while. Sorry, no matter what results are on the field this season, as long as the Gophers didn't lose out, PJ Fleck's name is going to remain a name that is going to pop up. He's a good coach. He's had a sustained track record of success at a program that has less resources than most. It's just what it is going to be. In today's article on On3 and the latest Arkansas coaching search intel, Pete Nakos mentioned that Fleck's name is among those that has popped up in his discussions with sources, but by no means is he also, the top candidate right now. But I think this is just another sign, like you said, that it's going to be an interesting offseason, and we've said it personally to each other. It may not be this group of jobs right now that are the ones to watch with Fleck, but perhaps what happens in this next wave or the third wave once hires are made and jobs open up here after the end of the season, whether that's hot because coaches left for other jobs or coaches got fired.
Yeah, and like Gophers fans fully realize, PJ Fleck is fully aware of uh, the bargaining that goes behind the scenes in terms of his name floating out there for other jobs. Does that cause Minnesota to bump up his assistant salary pool, put more resources into football at Minnesota, which could entirely be the ending of this entire coaching carousel for Fleck and the Gophers? But then again, there is some truth to his name popping up some places that maybe he does have interest in making a move at some point. So I do not expect it to quiet down between now and I guess mid-December when the coaching carousel starts to have some dominoes fall.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty similar to what we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, this isn't even a oh, he's definitely gone type conversation. I'm still willing to bet that he's the head coach of the Golden Gophers in 2026. But if you're a Gophers fan who gets easily annoyed by this type of conversation or news, it might be best for you just to go on Twitter and mute the word Fleck and coaching carousel because it is going to pop up for some jobs for sure going forward. But I think we covered a lot of this recruiting episode, Tony. Like we said, we're going to have a Minnesota-Oregon preview right after this. Probably a quick one since this one went 40 minutes. But, yeah, I think we covered a lot on this recruiting class. It was good to talk about what the Gophers were able to do on the recruiting cycle lately.
Yeah, I agree. It should be a fun offseason.
All right, well, we will surely be talking more recruiting soon, I'm sure. But we'll also, we'll be talking also Minnesota and Oregon real soon. So be sure to check out our next episode on that right after you finish up this one. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.